Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to episode 29 of International Expansion Explained. My guest today is Peter Park, who is the founder and head of sales at Florage Exports, which is a fractional export agency working with high growth food and beverage businesses in both Australia and the UK. Peter is a really experienced Asia business operator, and he's managed the Asia expansion of several Australian brands in China, Japan, and Korea. He also runs a regular interview newsletter introducing young entrepreneurs doing business in Asia. And Peter is multicultural and multilingual, so he speaks native Korean, but also intermediate Chinese, I think also through your wife, yeah, and conversational Japanese. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you for the welcome, and great to be here.
Thank you. And maybe somebody who is listening to us live on either LinkedIn or YouTube could just give us a thumbs up and a little bit of a comment and say hi in the chat so that we know that we are actually live and not just talking to ourselves on Restream. That would be quite nice. Maybe we can start out though, Peter, with you giving us a little bit of the backstory about how you actually got into international business and how that you arrived at the point that you're at now, because I think you didn't have a completely linear journey. I know that when I was looking that you're a lawyer by training, right, originally?
Yeah, so I think it's everyone's journey is different, and I think when I sort of look back, it was small little events that happened throughout my career that sort of led to where I am. And obviously, this time last year, this is when I properly started my business, Florage. It's meant to represent flow and the bridge. Like let's be the bridge between the flows, and that's kind of how I came up. But I guess, yeah, I studied law at university, and that's more than I think 14 years ago. But I knew that I didn't want to. I loved working with numbers because like when you're a kid, like you're good at math and you think you're good at it, so you kind of go on and trying to apply that to business world where it makes money. So it's like, number plus money, finance, let's do that. Very simplistic way, and that's what I kind of did during university. I guess my first job was in that area. Like I got a job as an analyst working for a venture capital family office. So we invested in startups. So from the day one of my professional working career, I was working with small businesses and seeing the risks. And this totally changed the way I see about the entrepreneurship. I believe that climbing up the ladder in a big corporate was the way to go, based on what my parents told me and based on what everyone told me while growing up in Australia, and in some sense, in more of like a middle class suburbs in Australia. But it wasn't like there are people grinding and building the wealth that will last for generations. So I guess like it really opened me up to that risk, taking the calculated risk to build your wealth and be successful. And that's kind of what I took away from my first job. And that sort of, kept going after that point as I moved through, the next job, which was in small business financial consulting, and then to working for a tech startup, not tech startup, food startup that was raising capital and expanding to Asia. And most recently, I held a role head of finance and supply chain for American multinational company, where I was in charge of managing their operations in Asia. So that's kind of like where my largest exposure to Asian markets come from, mostly in China. I've worked with two brands that had the direct business interest in China, and I was deeply involved in that. And I would say that was probably my first time really getting my hands on with doing business in Asia in some sense. But as Kathryn, as you pointed out earlier, my background is Korea, my wife is Taiwanese, and I've lived in both countries. So I think there was always that a passion for Asia and interest in the cultures. And but these things are not very businessy. They're not very commercial. So I always wondered, how can I bring this into my commercial venture or whatever I end up doing, whether that is a corporate job or my own thing. And, what about all this technical knowledge that I've built up from financial consulting and working in food industry? I just didn't really know how that could all come into one place. So I just thought this time last year, as I was quitting my cushy corporate job, like, let's just do export because that seems to be the thing that kind of brings all of these together. Now, like export is not easy industry because there are different challenges, but I'm like, you know what, like I know that, but if I can make it through and make a little bit of money to support myself and pay the bills, that's a huge success, and that's the definition of success for me for the foreseeable future. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, thank you. No, and I think it's always so interesting to hear people's backstories because when you actually look back on it retrospectively, it all seems so logical that that would actually be a good path for you to take. But often at the time, you can only really see like one jump ahead, don't you? I mean, I know there are people who have this big master plan, but I think for a lot of us, you just keep taking what seems like the next right small step and see where it takes you and let things develop from there. So, yeah.
100%. Yes, that
Yeah.
was exactly it. And we'll probably cover like what I would have done I think later in the interview if I
Yeah.
were to go back to my younger self, but let's save the good part for later.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, we've had a couple of comments come in. So thank you, people, all those listeners, for letting us know that we are actually live. One time Restream flaked out on me and didn't connect to LinkedIn, which was a bit of a shock.
Mm,
Yeah. So from there, I think I'm going to just make this really abrupt change. We're not going to have a cool transition. I'm just going to jump right in to the nitty gritty and ask you
love it.
straight up, what do you look for as the attributes in a brand or a company that tells you that Korea is the right market for their international expansion rather than Japan or Taiwan? Because it's
Hmm.
a question of, is this company export ready, or is this company Korea ready, or China ready, or yeah,
Hmm.
any other
Yeah.
market that you care to choose? Is always kind of a hot topic with consultants as to how you're going to actually qualify that company. And it's quite hard to tell a company, sorry, I don't think you're ready for whatever market they've set their heart on, isn't it? So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think I get a lot of questions like that from people who are interested in exporting, and it's really difficult to kind of assess quickly whether they are indeed ready for it or they can take it on. But I'll probably say that from a general perspective, I tend to ask these 5 questions, which is have they exported outside their domestic market? Do they have a export manager or a founder who's had a previous experience with export? And those 2 questions really trying to establish whether they have some level of maturity in the business. Because I cannot just handhold them throughout the whole journey, and then just they have to rely on me because they also need to do their heavy lifting. So I try and sort of at least understand the basic level of understanding they've got. Um, the other 3 questions is have they traveled overseas and done the trade shows? You would be very surprised that many of these brands that are interested in exporting or even currently exporting have not visited the countries that they export to, which just shocked me. But it's like,
I hear
okay,
it
well,
so
business
often.
is business.
Yeah, I hear it so often. I
Hmm.
I was talking with Kimberly Kirkendall the other week for
Oh
her
yeah.
podcast, and we had exactly the same discussion about how shocking it is that
Hmm.
companies want to export to markets, and it doesn't, especially in the consumer goods space, and they never even go there to look at the shelf where their products are going to be presented.
Yeah. And, probably 2, 3 years down the track, they wonder why their communication broke down with their distributor or importer. Well, it's goes to show that, the relationship was fragile. But anyway, I try and sort of figure those things out. And obviously, like, you got to look at whether they have some level of budget. I mean, I mostly work with small businesses, so I don't expect them to set aside a huge budget or anything like that. But have you got like a few $1,000s lying around to pay for like a product registration and sending samples, which cost hundreds of dollars sometimes if you send it by express post? So, and some businesses, and I'm very surprised, some businesses don't even want to spend a couple of $100s on sending samples. So, at that point, I sort of go, well, you're not really serious, or you don't, and I don't want to like kind of give away too much of my effort and time to kind of change your mind, because we're starting from a very low level. So yeah, those are some of the general questions that I asked brands. If you ask me specifically what would make sense for Korea companies interested in Korea, this one's like a bit more difficult, I think, and nuanced. But I guess having the Korean background and having seen many brands that do well in Korea, I think your brand or packaging needs to be like quirky, and like it's got to have some sort of a personality to it. Like you can't just be like a
The
blanket like
100
copycat.
pasta
Yeah.
with the USP, we're from Italy.
I'm sorry?
With the USP, we're from Italy. The 100th pasta with just the USP that they're from Italy.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even that works. Well, although I would say there are a lot of Italian brands now in Korea, so it's a bit competitive. But yeah, like country of origin, like it's a strong USP. Like, I mean, I've talked to a few brands that were manufactured in Southeast Asia. I'm not like being discriminatory or anything like that, but they do. Koreans do have a more preference for brands that were manufactured in Europe or Australia, for example, as opposed to Southeast Asia, because the pricing says the story, because the quality of ingredients and that says the story. So they're very sophisticated to understand this. Whereas from an outsider point of view, they would think that, oh, like, you just care about where it's from. Well, no, they look at the quality and the brand reputation that these countries have built up over many, many years. Like these governments have invested a lot of time, and that has obviously done a very good job for the Korean consumers. So these are sort of the things that I would look at for such companies.
Yeah, and I think it has to be differentiated as well, because in the past I've sold products into Korea that have been produced in, let's say, the eastern part of Central Europe. And Koreans can sometimes, they're a bit, if you say something's produced in Hungary or something's produced in the Czech Republic, it also doesn't have the same touch as saying it's produced in France, Italy, Germany, UK. I'm not saying it's not acceptable, because it obviously is good quality, it's European quality, but you have to actually specify which country it's from, because you can't just say it's from the EU for external exports.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's right.
yeah.
But I mean, speak just slightly off the topic though. There is a Polish brand that exports pasteurized sterile milk to
Yeah.
Korea, which is like #1 position in
Mhm.
Korea, 80% market share. You would have never think that that's kind of the things that a Polish company can achieve. But hey, there are cases like this, and that ends up forming the impression or perception of Poland as a country in
Yes.
Korea. So you can also leverage that if you are brand from such countries. So
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you recommend to your clients that they go about doing their preparation before they enter into Korea?
mm.
Which kind of specifics do you ask them to look at, or do you ask them to prepare upfront for you to be able to go ahead with a project?
Yeah, so I guess it's assuming that these brands are serious enough to put in a little bit of time to understand their target market. Obviously, I would give these two pieces of advice because these are the things that I would have liked to see from brands if they were to approach me now. The first thing is I would go to I would need to figure out, I guess, what their HS code is. So this is a code that you need to use to categorize your product in the global trade system. Just in if you don't know what that is, so there are tools online where you can type in your HS code of your product, and it will show you the import statistics of all of the products that fall under that category. So,
Yeah.
I would go to a website. I think it's called the tradelinks.com. I'll share the full URL in the chat afterwards. But I go to tools like this, put in the HS code, of a brand that I'm interested in, or in this case, you would be the brand owner. And you look at if the products under that category are growing in import value. Who's the top 5 countries who are importing? Like, say, for example, when I type in olive oil, the growth has been pretty good over the last few years. And then the top countries is Spain, Italy, Greece. So I would know straight away that if you are a brand from these countries selling this product, then more likely like you would have a good chance of getting into Korea than as opposed to coming from a country that's not known for exporting olive oil. Then you would have to spend more time educating the customers. So identifying those, I guess, some early challenges through method like this, I would expect from brands.
Yeah. And what do you feel it is? I know you mentioned country of origin as being,
Mm.
and quality of ingredients as being topics that speak for especially Australian brands, for example. But what are the other, let's say, other criteria that you say this makes Australian brands especially appealing to Korean buyers and consumers?
Mm. Um, to be brutally honest with you, Australia as a consumer goods destination is not a very strong have not formed a strong image in the eyes of Korean consumers yet. Uh, Things such as beef, dairy,
Mhm.
iron ore, and these sort of things, like primary
Primary.
agricultural and natural resources, they have done an excellent job forming a positive image of Australia as a country of origin in Korea. But when it comes to a consumer goods, I don't think they have quite cracked that yet. I mean, obviously there are a few companies like Bundaberg beer, like
Yeah.
the fizzy ginger beer from eastern coast of Australia. They've done a great job expanding their brand awareness, but there aren't a whole lot of them in Korea. So I think it's you just gotta rely on just being Australian. But really, in reality, it is a point of differentiation, but it's not a deal breaker. So you can't over rely on things like that because at the end of the day, people will assess you based on your how innovative and different you are, as opposed to what country you are from. It could be a plus point, but it's 100%, I think, in my experience, not a deal breaker anymore. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, yeah, but not now.
Yeah, I think it's more like if you've got a good story to tell
Hmm.
and you can prove that you have high quality, I think that
Mm.
safety and high quality, and maybe if you have something in your story that makes it a little bit easier from a marketing side, then those are all steps that are a good one to help you get into a market like Korea. And like you say, that question of country of origin, it's kind of a hygiene factor, isn't it? Like if you
It
have
is.
a country of origin that's seen as being very safe, it's great to have, but
Mm.
it's not going to stop you doing business if your quality is good and you come from a different country.
Yeah. Put it the other way, like Koreans and many Asian countries, when they put up a product description online, they have a big scroller where you have to keep scrolling down to look at images, where it's from, factory certifications, HACCP, GMP, and they show like a snapshot of the certificates. I would say if you're from Australia, probably you don't need to do a lot of that, as opposed to from a countries where the hygiene may be a little bit less at, like,
Well known.
good, and you have to show those, because you will be asked those questions, like, and these buyers are not being discriminatory or anything. I have to make it very clear, it is just how the consumers view, so therefore you just got to produce the evidence to support your case. So
Yeah. And I would say that also, if you have products, like if you have organic products from Europe and you want to send them to Korea, you have to send a copy of your organic certificate with every single shipment. And it's not because that's just the way that the system works. You just have to get one of those copies each time. It's yeah.
yeah.
So what what are your recommendations? I know it's very hard to generalize about these things and that each
Mm.
case is different, but for most smaller brands, how do you recommend for them to take the path into market entry for Korea? Because I have certain ideas on that, and I'm sure that you have too. But it's interesting
Mm.
to hear other people's thoughts
Mhm.
on the topic.
Yeah, so I would probably lay it out in 3 steps. And I'm not talking about like, oh, this is how you start and this is how you're gonna look like in year 5, because you don't know anything what's gonna happen in the first 12 months. But to really get to a point where you can say that, yeah, I think I've cracked this market and start to seeing some momentum, I would say it takes 3 steps. And I think Kathryn, you covered this extensively in an article a while ago about cross-border e-commerce in Korea on platforms like Coupang, which I think in terms of the process, it's getting easier. So if you do have some time and serious level of interest in the Korean market, then you can contact platforms like Coupang, and then try and maybe set up a store there, so that the customers can start purchasing your products, and it will take probably a week or two to send your products. So you can't be fresh, you got to be ambient and have a long shelf life. But if it makes sense for you to do that, and maybe you might have a little bit of budget to run some influencer marketing, like pay a few micro influencers to do blog posts, and then you can start generating a little bit of demand, and so that these people will go and purchase it on these websites. Because
Is it,
the whole point of this is not
yeah,
really to make money, but it's actually to get your product results on the search results, like and slowly kind of make expose your brand to people and gather the actual sales data, because this will really help you engage any potential in importers in the future. You can basically show them, we've sold this that many. Imagine how many more we can sell if you officially import our product. So I think it's a very strategic move if you can do it, but it's not mandatory, because you're not in the market, so it's still a bit difficult.
and of course, it's not possible for every single item. If you're selling wine or beer, then you can't sell via cross border because you can't sell alcohol. As far as I know, you can't sell alcohol still on the cross border channels. But
No.
I mean, I'd add it's also a great way for you to test and to see which products are going to get the best resonance. If you've
Mhm.
got a range of 20 SKUs, it's also a great way to find out which flavors are going to have the best impact or be best received by Korean consumers by testing them online. Or I had a couple of projects in the last couple of years where a company was they were looking to attend the food and hotel or in Seoul, and so they set up a store to do cross-border business on Coupang in ahead of that time, so that they could demonstrate to distributors that they were serious about the market.
Yeah.
I think that's also an interesting strategic move for them to show that it's done that way, if it's done well.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess to add to that, I mean, obviously the most common way would be to try and find the distributor who's interested in you, and generally you would need that person. Well, because Korea is a fast-moving market, like you can't really go offline and then like wait to go online or vice versa. I think like a lot of the consumer uh, brand growth, it has to be omni-channel these days. It's not like just let's go D2C and make lots of profit, or go offline and generate volume growth. You got to do a bit of both. So your importer, whether they're small or big, need to have those capabilities, and do that for the first 12 months and slowly build up some sales data, some online presence with the real customer reviews. And then you will then have your importer will have a leverage to start approaching a larger retail accounts at that point, and they'll have the budget to be able to negotiate the promotional discounts and things like that. But yeah, that's how I would say is typically a brand can approach the Korean market based on my experience.
Maybe you can tell us also a little bit about Market Curly, because I think that for
Mm,
foreign brands that this can also be a really, I mean, I've talked a lot about Coupang on my website simply because that's generally,
mm,
let's say, a good cross-border channel, not just for food and beverage brands, but
yeah.
Market Curly is a very specific channel that for imported brands can offer really great potential, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I good point. Sorry, I almost missed that. So I think Market Collie is probably the best and the only channel that you can go if you're a food and beverage brand, or maybe doing some health, sorry, beauty or home care and things like that. And the reason is that Coupang's too big. It's got international the direct import channel. It's covering pretty much like like every single category imaginable, whereas Market Cully is very much focused on food, and they have a very thorough process to filter the brands that they bring on. So, and the customer base there is fairly loyal, and yeah, like they're small enough that they don't just it makes it a little bit easier for smaller brands to approach and build presence. And in fact, we the brand that I supported, Australian brand that makes seasoning products, they were able to list there about this time last month, and they've had now 100 and over 100 reviews there, and it's frequently ranked up there. And it's because the platform kind of likes that kind of products, and the customers are always looking for something new. Like it's actually a place where they go and trial new products, and that they're open to doing that. So if your product has a unique USP with a decent pricing, then it's a product where they can easily discover you. As opposed to Coupang, we listed on Coupang pretty much around the same time as Market Curly, but we've only got 6 reviews, and probably about 10 to 20% of the sales as Market Curly, even though that Coupang is huge as a platform. It's because it's hard to cut through the noise, and we
Yeah.
don't have enough budget as a small business to create enough noise to be present, noticeable on Coupang. So I think for these reasons, Market Curly is a very good platform.
Yeah. No, I agree that especially for smaller brands, then it's great to start with that kind of specialist approach because you've also got more chance of talking to the team at Market Curly and getting really that support that you need when you're going into a new market that you don't know and that they can warn you. Whereas Coupang will let you do what you want pretty much. You just put it on there, just throw it on the shelf, as it were, metaphorically
Mhm.
speaking, and see what happens. It's a bit like throwing spaghetti at the wall, isn't it? To try
Yeah,
to cut through.
that's right. But I guess the question is, if you were to throw spaghetti at a small wall as opposed to big wall to leave a mark, then which wall would you throw it at? And
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think with the online, you've got the advantages of fast feedback and so on, but you also have to be really careful to manage your pricing so that you don't, let's say, cause yourself any problems when you then work through an importer later on, if you're doing that directly yourself. I think you have to be quite strategic about how you go into the online channel.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a very good point because before we listed this Australian product on Market Curly, we did a full value chain, pricing value chain exercise with the distributor, and I got the support from the brand that they're okay with that because as we were, you can't just list on Market Curly at whatever price you think is good and just start doing the discounts because if you well the margin, even though Market Curly is a good platform, they will still charge a margin like about 40 to 45%. So there's really not that much room to move if you discount 10 to 20%. So you need to make sure that you do that exercise with your importer before you list, so that even after you discount, they can still make a little bit of money, and you can also maybe like provide some support so that they can continue doing that, and so that at the end of the day, the customers can buy the product at a fairly good price, what they consider, oh yeah, like this is a little bit expensive, but I can see why they charge us this much. Or they could say, oh, there's a reason why this is a little bit cheap because say it's like this product is a very small sized, but it tastes good, so it's okay. Like it doesn't become an annoying factor for them.
Yeah, it's hard to get that balance right and to say, okay, it's not so expensive that people won't give it a try.
Hmm.
Um, but you're also not throwing it out there. I mean, if you put something on the market and it looks too cheap, then people also are suspicious about whether it's really good quality if the price isn't at a level that they would expect it to be for that kind of a product, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's got to be somewhere. It's a fine line to walk, let's say.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
consumers are very smart. I think I was very surprised that they know exactly where the pricing point sits, even though this particular product from Australia was like kind of one of its kind and never really seen anything similar on the Korean market. So I was very surprised, but we were right. Like we priced it at a fair price, and they
Mhm.
think that, oh, for I would never pay. Basically, what the customer said is, I would never pay this price, which was like $6 or something Australian, so $4.50 USD. I would never pay this for a domestic brand, but I'm okay paying that for imported foods because I expect a higher quality from imported food brands. So it's like, okay, there was a fair enough price for that. So they've got different pricing points in mind, and yeah, just gotta get that right.
Yeah. And I'm always a big fan of doing this kind of full value chain costing exercise. I know that
Mm.
some brands shy away from it because it can be a
Mhm.
difficult discussion with
Yeah.
importers. But I think it's better to have the clarity from the start rather than to get a long way into a project and realize that your pricing just isn't going to work and
Mm.
nobody is going to make any money on the deal. And therefore, you're actually just wasting everybody's time with if you can't make it work for that
Mm.
particular market. So, yeah.
That, yeah, that's right. And I think that's why you need someone who can do this kind of exercise for you. Or if you're a founder or a export manager, you should have the skills and knowledge to be able to analyze this kind of commercial models, because some distributors may give you their value chain and what they expect. Some might not share that, so you kind of need to build your own to make sense of the pricing that they're about to set. So, like either way, you need to have the knowledge of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you need to know what is going to be the customs duty on your products. You need to know what are going to be if you're selling alcohol, especially it's also quite complicated when you go into Korea,
Mm.
because there's excise duty as well. which is charged per liter depending on the amount of alcohol in the product. So you have to be quite careful. And I would say usually there's a trade commission, especially for European countries. Australia also has quite active trade commissioners, I think, who can help you out with that kind of formality type information around regulations and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I would highly recommend you to leverage your country's trade offices in Korea or any of the target export markets. You'd be surprised at what they can help you with. They definitely won't be able to help you every way, but they might do one thing that could change your game in Korea, like
Yeah.
introducing you to a lead or introducing you to giving you a free booth space at a trade show or some sort of a support. So reach out to them as well.
Yeah. And often they already have connections to a certain number of importers. So it's usually worth talking to them, because
Mm.
sometimes it has more weight if a trade commissioner who is attached to the embassy reaches out to an importer and says, I'm, you know, this company is looking for a partner.
Mm.
It can get you at least a foot in the door to have that initial meeting, which can be quite difficult to get hold of if you're a very small business.
Yeah. Or we had one case where this brand was participating in a trade show in Korea in June, the Seoul Hotel
Food and
Expo.
hotel. Yeah.
Yeah, food and hotel. And, one of Korea's largest department store buyer came along and just said, oh, yeah, I like this product. I want to import. But he's never really imported, and I think it was someone at the booth or said that, oh, actually, we will just refer you to this buyer we know. So you can talk to them, and that buyer will then talk to the brand so that, the brand owner who's Australian doesn't need to talk to the Korean buyer like in English directly, because the communication flow won't
It's
quite
difficult.
work.
Yeah.
Whereas it actually made more sense for this department store buyer to go through a distributor, even if it's an added layer, because actually it makes their job easier. So it kind of like counterintuitive, but that's kind of how it works sometimes, I think, in the export world. Like,
Yeah.
so that's kind of like another way I think you can leverage your government contacts.
Yeah. I think that especially smaller brands shouldn't underestimate the power of working with a distributor who
Mm,
has the language skills and who also has the necessary contacts. Because if you work, and this goes for any market, I think, not just for Korea, but if you want to work directly with a supermarket chain, they expect you to be able to deliver in 2 cartons, maybe just with 2 days' notice. And that's not really very practical for, for most people. Whereas if you have a distributor who's in country, then you have the stock on the territory, as it were, and they can be delivered out a
mm,
couple of times every week or even
mm,
more often if that's necessary. So there's a lot of advantages of working with a distributor that a smaller brand shouldn't underestimate, and
mm.
shouldn't just see it as being a cost factor in the full value analysis. It's also brings you a lot of benefits.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I've got a interesting story to add there just quickly. I think that same department buyer, uh, you know, was going to, I think, reopen one of their stores, which was going to really help the foreign brands, entering the Korean market. But what the distributor said is that, oh, you know what, like I um I probably would not commit to their timeline because you know it's very typical for Korean buyers, especially department stores, to come to the day of reopening or come to the day of major events and they just like suddenly change their mind or change the shelf positioning or whatever that kind of throws up the whole plan. So like don't try to like commit to something like that if you're a brand owner. Like just take a little bit of time and rely on us to kind of problem solve those things if they happen. And if you're a brand owner who's don't have a people on the ground, you really won't be able to react to such last minute changes from the buyer side like that. And you got to have someone on the ground. And I think that's kind of the nature of the Korean retail scene in one word is that they always change, and you can't really just rely on what they tell you and then expect the exact same thing to happen in 3 4 months time, because it's a very fast changing environment. And I could really feel that from just that example.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that for anybody who's looking to work almost anywhere in Asia, you have to be ready for it to be a really fast. It's when you say fast moving consumer goods, it's not just fast move, it's not just the product that moves quickly, it's also the way that the decisions are made. It's also the details of those decisions, and therefore having somebody as a partner, and also having somebody to advise you who really has experience of working in the market and who has those relationships is really important.
Yeah,
Maybe,
that's right.
yeah. I mean, maybe you can give us a little bit of insight about which categories you see as being the hottest categories at the moment in the food and drink
Mm.
space.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a two types. I would say the seasonal ones, that the ones that come and go, and then the ones that sort of is a long lasting. I think the ones that sort of have come and go that have done well is the snack and dessert category. You the most recent examples in Korea being, the sugar coated the fruits. I think tanghulu in
Mhm.
in Chinese. And then also more recently, the Middle Eastern, I think pistachio chocolate, that also kind of
Oh,
went
the
viral
Dubai
because,
chocolate.
yeah, Dubai chocolate, that's it. Yeah, that clearly died a few months ago, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of businesses that are left with excess stock and they don't know how to sell. But you know, I don't really recommend you as a foreign brand to go with trends like that, because you just simply cannot keep up, even though you have everything ready. Um,
No, I think you have to be lucky, and if you happen to be the product that hits the trend, then you ride the wave, you enjoy it, and you
mhm.
take that as like an added benefit. But you can't plan on that kind of success, can you? So you have to have a plan for regular
Yeah,
sales if you really want to be
yeah.
long-term successful in a market.
That's right. I mean, it could be a nice little bonus if you're already selling in Korea and then it happens. But I guess the other category that I think would be doing well, and this is based on I think a bit of statistics plus my own experience, is that like a basic cooking ingredients and staples, but of
Mhm.
high quality. So
Yeah.
I mentioned the seasoning because I've exported
Yep.
olive oil,
Yeah.
and then what else is there? Yeah, things like that, olive oil, butter, and things like that that we just eat every day. But obviously, you can't get high quality ingredients like this, because you got to think that Korea is not a natural resource rich country. So when it comes to things like basic ingredients like that, they have to rely on imports. And they're looking consumers are looking for healthier products as they cook more at home, because eating out is becoming more and more expensive, not just in Korea but around the world. But I think it's particularly more obvious in Korean societies. So yeah, people cooking more and they care more about their health, and there are more single and couple households in Korea as well than any other countries in the world, because the population is aging, people are having less kids. So yeah, I think this category will grow. And in fact, the Euromonitor says that the annual growth rate for these sort of products will be 10% plus. Now, they're starting from a very low base. I'm talking about maybe like 10, 20, $30 million export value a year. But hey, like if you're one of the few brands that are make up that category and grow with it, it could be like a few $1 million, but that is a pretty decent export
Yep.
revenue just from one market. So I think, yeah, if you are there in that category, then you can do well.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what do buyers in Korea? We talked a little bit about consumer expectations and what's important for the consumers. What about the expectations of the buyers? And is that in contrast in some way to the expectations that brands have of the market? Are brands having really realistic expectations as to what they need to do to be successful in Korea, or what makes a successful brand in Korea?
Yeah. I think in one word it'd be patience. I think the reason why I say that is because yes, it always takes time to sell the products and things. Again, and brand owners know that, but they don't. What they don't know is how difficult it is to get through the regulations to get the products in the market in the first place. And Kathryn, you know this too well. I know it from my painful experience that these things don't happen in 1 month. It can take 6 months, like depending on the markets, like Indonesia, up to 12 months.
Yep.
And I don't think that a lot of brand owners know, because obviously if they knew, then they would already be exporting. So they don't know, so the expectation is very low, and they are faced with these regulatory questions that are very granular, tedious, and I sometimes feel like they run out of patience. And I really, as someone in the middle, because I also, am
Yep.
technically an agent, I really have to kind of convince them that you gotta like stay patient and kind of almost explain logically why it is the case. And sometimes even then they still don't understand, because the put it this way, the Korean, I think the food regulation system is like the most strict portion of the EU, Japan, and America, and any other systems around the world all mushed together.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so
exactly
it
what it
just
feels like. Like they went
Yeah,
around and looked for the strictest things they could find.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think it kind of makes sense, because Korean bureaucrats, they don't want to take a risk like any other public servants, but I think it's kind of another level in Korea. And so they basically made it risk averse, but almost too perfectly. So
yeah,
things get caught out that are pretty relaxed in your own country. Like for example, like we exported a product that had a mark natural, and they basically said, "Oh, sorry, you can't get it in because our definition of a natural is like 2 pages long, a table that was 2 pages long." I'm like, oh my God. So I need to exactly know how I boil my ingredients and cut my ingredients, evaporate moisture from my experience. That all affects what it means to be natural. It's like no one cares about that stuff in Australia. Like, I mean, to that granular detail. So, but it gets caught out. So,
yeah,
and people, brand owners are surprised that, oh, like we thought we are natural. Well, yeah, in here, but not over there.
yeah. And I've also had clients who've been surprised and sometimes somehow shocked about the fact that they actually need to completely open up their recipes. And Korea isn't the
Mm,
only market in Asia that demands that, but they're often quite surprised that even, let's say, maybe they have something that isn't really an ingredient, but it's used in the process to help something in the consistency of the product, or it's used as part of the production process, let's just say, that this also has to be declared to the Korean authorities. And sometimes one processing ingredient is allowed, but the other one isn't. And so you really can get caught out on what is ultra fine print of things.
mm. And honestly, I even the importers cannot advise you on that until they
Yeah,
actually put your products through, because it can get very granular.
yeah,
Um, Another example is like we imported this chickpea and basically said that the acid level of this peroxide value, I think whatever that means, in the product is higher than the Korean regulations. And you don't really care about those things, because the way they define it is very different to what you would expect back home. So we didn't know, and therefore it didn't go through. So yeah, it is tricky.
yeah. And I think that we're coming a little bit to the end, but I think that companies who are looking to export to a market like Korea, we're taking
Mhm.
Korea as our example today, but there are other markets out there who work in similar ways. They have to be patient. You can't expect that
Mm.
you're going to have an importer the day after tomorrow, and next week you're going to have your first export order, because it doesn't work like that. These
Mm,
markets take time, and you also have to, like we mentioned at the beginning, be prepared to invest a little bit. I'm not saying you have to have thousands and thousands in budget, but you do have to be prepared to take over some
mm,
expenses, and you have to be prepared to invest some money up front in
mm.
order to actually get into the market for the first time, to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, and I think probably add to that. Those are great points. To add to that, as you're going through this process and being patient, whatever comes up, like you need to problem solve that with your importer and distributor, and that sort of like adds a little bit more richness to your relationship building with them, which I think can be very helpful when you start growing in the market because you've already gone through the hard part with them. So there's a higher level of trust between both parties. So yeah, like being patient together is also a good thing.
Yeah. And like you also mentioned at the beginning, go to the market, sit down, have dinner with people, have a few drinks with that distribution partner if you're somebody who drinks alcohol. But even if you don't have to consume alcohol. You can sit with them, you can drink something, juice with them, but take the time, invest in those relationships, because that will be the foundation of your strong business in the Korean market, because they will then
Yeah,
have your back if you've got a good relationship there.
exactly. And do a favor for yourself and do visit the country because it will kind of maybe add a completely new perspective to your worldview. Because, for many of us brand owners in the West, we don't really venture out to Asia that much. I mean, like you go to Japan and Thailand and whatnot, but so it'll bring something new to your view. So in that way, it's a very rich experience. So even if your business doesn't grow, like you take away with something very valuable to your life. So also very good from that perspective.
Yeah, there's certainly nothing quite like standing in front of the shelf and looking at your category in a foreign supermarket and realizing, okay, there's this level of competition, or there's this level of pricing, or this is how the marketing works, this is how the positioning works. All of those things that are the basics, the, let's say, the Lego building blocks of your marketing policy, that you really can think about how you need to adjust what you're doing currently if you want to be successful in that market.
Yeah, we'll put it into perspective. Like I think it's nice to see it in front of it. Yeah, in front of the your product overseas. So 100%
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah. Peter, we're coming a little bit to the end today. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask everybody.
Yes.
The first
That.
one is, we touched on it slightly right back at the beginning, but knowing what you do now, what
Mhm.
advice would you give your younger self starting out on this international journey?
Yeah. So I think. Oh, actually, I did prepare for the question, but I interpreted it as what would I tell myself, younger self, early in the career, which kind of is more targeted at younger people. But I guess the reason why I ended up focusing on the Korean market is I had a little bit of exposure to China, Japan, and maybe a parts of Southeast Asia, and I realized that export is a very difficult journey. I mean, we've already talked about so many different challenges, so unless your heart is in it, unless you're serious and committed, dedicated, I think it's difficult to really get the value of the export. But the reward is immense. So I think try and find the market that your heart or your company values really resonate with. I'm sure you can find at least one market and then try and see what you can achieve in that market rather than just doing scattergun approach. Obviously, if you're a big company with a big budget, then you can come up with a 3-year strategy and start doing that. But I don't think that's feasible for many smaller brands. So I would suggest doing that. Um, I guess the other thing is, if your government is giving you a free spot in a trade show, even if you're not ready, maybe just go along. Like if it's not too much cost to you, because again, the export journey has to start somewhere, and it needs to start with some level of exposure to the overseas markets. You don't need to be ready, but I think getting out there and feeling the market on the ground is crucial. So I would also advise myself to do that. And I kind of did that when I was younger, being in Korea and Taiwan in working for different companies. So I think that's what kind of got me where I am here today.
Cool, thank you. And finally, who should contact you if they're interested in what they've heard during this discussion? Which services do you offer, and how can people reach you? I will put all of your contact details under the YouTube recording of this, so that if somebody's looking to reach out to you, they know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I probably would say the food and beverage brands in general, but I would I guess I if someone is looking for a have already got a buyer interest and but don't really know how to execute, and that relates to countries like Korea and Taiwan, then I can be of help. And I guess because of the brands that I deal with, like mostly in the kind of cooking ingredients and place categories like that, if your products sort of fall into the category where it can be like non-seasonal staples throughout the year, that has got a very good a merit to many buyers in Asia. So I think I can also add some insights and value there. Yeah. So that I think those are sort of ideal people. And obviously, if you've had a previous experience to export experience to Asia, or you're based in Australia or New Zealand, I mean, I know what it's like to dealing with the brands over here, at least this side of the world. So I can definitely put you in touch with the right people, or give you some words of couple of tips on how to export to those markets.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you once again for joining me today. It's been, I think, a really insightful, interesting discussion. I hope it's been interesting for everybody who's listening.
Amazing. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, hopefully we'll keep talking about Korea and encouraging people to export more.
Definitely. It's an exciting market. And as you know, I'm also a big fan that Korea is one of the places to be.